Hello, my name is Bruce Gillette. I'm a pastor in rural New York State, and also it's my joy to serve with the Presbyterians for Earth Care. We're going to begin this evening with a very brief prayer and then introductions to the gifted speakers we're going to be blessed hearing tonight. We are very happy you have all joined us for this Basics of Tree Planting, a faith-based perspective on getting started. We are not only going to offer this now to you, but also it is being recorded, so it'll soon be on the Presbyterians for Earth Care YouTube website, so you can share it with other people near and far, and we hope it'll encourage tree planting all over God's creation. Let's begin with a brief prayer, and this comes from a hymn celebrating trees. So I'm just going to offer the final verse of it. Let us pray together. O God, you made the trees, the apple and the pine. You made them all, and still you call, take care of what is mine. May we receive your gift and give ourselves anew to do our best as we've been blessed to care for trees for you. Amen. We are blessed by trees, and we are blessed tonight by having three people who can share some wonderful insights about how we can nurture these in our homes, in our churches, and all over the place. And I will tell you, several months ago, a group of us were interviewing Mindy for the job of being the coordinator for Presbyterians for Earth Care, and I was excited with her background, thinking maybe down the road we could ask her to lead a workshop. And then we started planning the conference in August, and Shelley was working in this areas too, and Diane has been doing it wonderfully with the Presbyterian Tree Project. So we have three people with experience. Let me run through their basic bios. I could talk quite long, but I know you want to hear them more than hearing about their bios. Shelly Barrick-Parsons is the Executive Director of Capital Trees in Richmond, Virginia. Shelley is a leader and collaborator that cares deeply about the relationship between people and the natural environment. She believes that green space provides a connection to our best selves, to one another, and to nature. She is a graduate of Meredith College, Union Presbyterian Seminary, where she has 3 degrees, including a PhD in Christian education. She has led and established ministries and nonprofits. And if you're enjoying her teaching tonight, as I know you will, go to the Presbyterian for Earth Care website and listen to the workshop she did this summer on faith formation and creation care. Mindy Heidenfelder is the coordinator of Presbyterians for Earth Care. She's a graduate of Virginia Tech and also the University of New Hampshire, master's there, both degrees in the field of managing natural resources. I think your BS was in forestry, wasn't it, if I remember correctly?
Yep.
Mindy has spent the last several years working in urban forestry, and she is an International Society of Arboriculturists certified. I'm having tongue twisting tonight. Arborist, how do you say it?
Arborist.
Arborist. Thank you. It's been a long day. Arborist. A lifelong Presbyterian, she lives in Wake Forest, North Carolina, and serves as the voluntary chair of her town's tree advisory board. Last but certainly not least is Diane Waddell, who has joined the workshop to share information about the Presbyterian Tree Project, a carbon offset program. Diane is a previous moderator for Presbyterians for Earth Care, the current moderator of Earthkeepers of the Heartland Presbytery, and a leader in the Joy New Worshiping Community in St. Joseph's, Missouri. This is one of the 1,001 worshiping communities. She has a long history of being a leader in creation care in the Presbyterian Church, and we're blessed to have her, as well as Mindy and Shelley, all here to share their wisdom and who inspire us all to plant trees. Please take it away.
Okay. Thank you, Bruce. I'm just going to start off, and if you're just now joining us and have a second, go ahead and put your favorite tree in the chat. We're all sharing our favorite trees.
Sue, can you get that?
Okay. I don't know what happened. Okay, so I'm going to just start off by giving you a quick overview of what we're going to be talking about tonight in our workshop, not to take up too much time, but we were going to be talking tonight about why we would want to plant trees, including what it does for the ecosystem and for spiritual formation. We're going to be talking about some tips for how you would want to go about organizing your own tree planting project, and there's lots of different parts to doing that, between partnerships, volunteers, logistics, and how to take care of a tree after it's planted. And then we're going to wrap up with Diane Waddell, who's going to talk to us a little bit about the Presbyterian Tree Project and some things that are just getting started, some exciting things just getting started with that, as well as a project that's going on in Peru and partnering with some people in Peru who are planting trees. And then we're going to be sure to share some resources. We'll try to put them in the chat for you as we go along. If we miss anything, we will make a whole list of all of our resources available to you, as well as a recording, hopefully by the end of this week, and we'll make sure to get you the link to that. If you have any questions during the program tonight, you can go ahead and type them in the chat, especially when I'm going through some information about how to plant a tree. If you want to ask me any questions, go ahead and type them in, and maybe I'll pause at the end of that section and answer a couple questions before Shelley gets started. Otherwise, we will answer as many questions as we can at the end. So I wanted to start off about why we would want to even really spend any time planting trees. And the basic reason is trees are awesome. A few of the great benefits of trees, you might be familiar with some of these, maybe some of this will be a little bit new to you, but trees give us cleaner air. Trees have the ability to filter particulates, and by that I mean dust, ash, pollen, and smoke, a lot of that especially in the urban areas. The tissues of the tree and the trunk, the leaves, the branches are all filters of these particulates and help clean those things out of the air. And trees also have the ability to absorb carbon dioxide. As a matter of fact, being a plant, they need carbon dioxide for photosynthesis, and they give off oxygen. Another really important thing about trees is the energy savings they give us. We probably don't always think about this, but trees can actually save us money, especially trees around our buildings and our homes. And trees, in addition to saving us money through energy, also help us cut back on the fossil fuels we use. For example, trees planted around your house, strategically planted to shade your house possibly from the hot afternoon sun in the shade, can give you some energy savings in trying to keep your house cool. You may or may not live in an area of the country where air conditioning is more crucial, but the shade that trees can provide your house will cut back on how much you need to run your air conditioning or your fans. If you live in a colder, windier part of the country, trees placed on the northern or western side of your house can serve as a windbreak, which might also help save you energy and reduce our use of fossil fuels used to heat your house in the winter. Trees also are important because they improve our water quality. And I'm sure most of you have heard of soil erosion, and trees help reduce soil erosion into our waterways. When we have a big storm or lots of rain, soil can be washed away into our streams and rivers, and that's also creates a cloudiness in the water, and too much runoff can disrupt the ecosystem in our waterways. And this is important that we have trees keeping the soil erosion to a minimum, because the more we develop our land and the more our surface area of our earth that we strip away the trees and plants, the more opportunity for erosion and runoff into our waterways. So it's important to go back and plant those trees. Also, the trees intercept nutrients in the rainwater runoff, helping to reduce the pollution. But the trees also help reduce heat extremes, especially in our cities and towns, the urban trees. They help cool down the hot city surfaces. And, you know, even in a parking lot, I know the first thing I look for when I pull in a parking lot is, are there any empty spaces under the trees, especially in the summer, because parking lots can get very hot in the summertime. And trees help keep the city surfaces from getting quite as hot. They also reduce something called the urban heat island effect. And our urban heat island, just to give you a little bit of information about that, if you've not heard that term before, when cities replace natural land cover, when they're developed, they replace it with dense concentrations of pavement, buildings, and other surfaces. And all of those things absorb heat from the sun. And because of this, we have increased energy costs and a lot more air pollution and also heat-related illness. And by making sure we plant plenty of trees, we can reduce this heat island effect. And as a matter of fact, it even makes our cities and towns a lot more comfortable and reduces illness. And more studies these days are showing that being around trees improves our health in general. Lots of health benefits coming from trees. And there have been more and more studies, even funded by healthcare systems, that have shown that patients in hospitals will have faster recovery time if they have views of green space, especially trees. They have shown that a hospital patient lying in bed looking out their window at a brick wall, compared to someone recovering from the same illness looking out their window at trees, the patient who has a view of the green trees out their window have been shown to recover faster. Also, the trees help improve mental health and concentration. Even studies have even shown that trees in the schoolyard help students concentrate better on their schoolwork, which is pretty amazing. So as you can see, there's all kinds of benefits to planting trees, and I don't think I really need to convince this crowd that trees are important, but those are all good points to make when you're trying to look for funding or trying to convince government officials that more trees do need to be planted. I do have a few tips for you tonight if you are feeling motivated to go out and plant some trees, because I think it's important to properly plant the trees. A lot of times, especially with church groups and nonprofits, they will get the funding they need to plant their trees. They'll purchase their trees, get all their equipment together, get their volunteers, go out and plant their trees. But if it isn't done correctly, that same group of people will be right back out there a few years later, replacing the trees they planted that didn't make it. So what you really want to do is save money, save time, and create the beautiful space that you're out to create by planting trees, by doing it properly the first time. And these steps I'm about to show you are the ones that have been shown through university research and the International Society of Arboriculture as being the techniques that result in the most successful, happy, healthy growing trees that you could plant. And before you plant your tree, I just wanted to show you the different types of trees that you might possibly be planting. Sometimes we get bare root trees, and typically that's the smaller ones like seedlings. If your project is to go out and plant hundreds of trees, or reforest a mountainside, a lot of times you'll be working with bare root seedlings. They're just lighter weight, and you can work with larger quantities because it's just the tree and its roots. Another type of tree that you might find in a nursery to plant is the balled and burlapped, which you can see in this picture. Those trees are generally grown in a field, and when they're the size that are ready to be planted, they will dig them up with a tree spade, wrap them in burlap, and often wrap that with wire or twine. And the third kind of tree that you might be planting is typically the most common, and as a homeowner, how you most commonly would find a tree in a nursery to plant, and that's containerized. And these trees are typically grown from seed in a pot, and what they'll do is as the tree grows, they will move it to a larger and larger pot until it's ready to go into the ground. And I found this great video by the Arbor Day Foundation that can show you to music in a minute and a half what it would probably take me 20 minutes or longer to do a good job of kind of walking you through the most basic correct steps of planting your tree. And some of the important things you're going to see in the video are that many people have questions about are, how deep do I plant the hole? Do I use mulch and how much? Do I need to water my tree? And some things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and play this video for you and let you enjoy tree planting to music. All right. I need to get out of this slide without starting the video again. Let's see here. Okay. Let's see here. Nope. Nope. Okay, here we go. I found it. Okay. So now we know how to plant our tree, right? Okay. So you're trying to pick out what tree your group is going to plant or what selection of trees. One thing you should keep in mind if you're doing a large area is try not to do all the same tree. It's a good idea to plant a variety of tree species. Lots of good reasons for that. I know some towns like to have all maples or all elms up and down the sides of the street and have everything look nice. Everything changes to the same color in the fall, that sort of thing. Unfortunately, the danger of that is if there's a disease or an insect that comes in that really likes that kind of tree, you could be in some trouble. And we do have a history of that happening with the American elm in the past. And so you want to be sure to try and plant a variety of tree species if you can. Something else you might want to consider, and this is one of my favorite quotes, is plant the right tree in the right place. And make sure that you're picking out either as a group or as an individual, the tree that's going to succeed the best in the location that you have picked out for it. So when you're picking out your tree, you just want to keep in mind, what is this tree supposed to look like when it's a fully grown mature tree? And you can easily look that up on your own. Look up the trees and find out some things about what it'll look like when it's fully grown. I think some people possibly make the mistake of filling the area with trees because the trees are small and there's a big empty space and you just want to fill it up. But unfortunately, later, this could lead to problems. One thing you want to consider is the full mature height of your tree. I can't say this enough, because if you're going to plant a tree that is going to get really big, don't be thinking that later, you shouldn't be thinking that later on, I will just cut it back. That's really unhealthy for the tree. I never recommend topping your tree. A little bit of pruning for structure is okay, but you really just don't want to plant a tree that is too large for your space. And I've just been reminded that we have some questions in the chat, so maybe I will pause. Thank you, Bruce, before I get too much more into the tree considerations. Ooh, somebody likes a chinkapin oak. Wow. Let's see. So I have a question here. We had landscapers plant trees with metal cages still on them. Will that be problematic? So I'm assuming you mean by metal cages around the roots. Some landscapers do still plant trees that way, and it's potentially okay to leave the cage on as long as it's been cut away completely. So what they would need to have done is cut all the metal wires anywhere around the top of the root ball. And then it's hard for me to show because you can't really see my hands, but folding the entire metal basket down around all the way down to the bottom of the root ball. Then you could lower it into the hole and fill it with dirt. But most of the tree roots are going to grow out and not down. So you want to make sure they have cut away enough of the tree cage so that the roots are able to spread out in the horizontal direction. So it could be it potentially could be okay, assuming they cut the basket back enough. Okay. Sure. So more about prepping the tree roots for planting when they are grown in plastic containers, because I know the video just kind of flew through that. So if you have a containerized tree and you pull it out, all the roots are kind of clumped together, really tight sometimes, or they could be circling around the tree base, which is also not good because whatever direction the roots are growing, they're just going to continue to grow like that. So what you want to do is take a knife or something sharp and kind of slash down the sides of the root ball once it's taken out of the container. That, yes, it does cut some of the smaller roots, but it also frees them up so that if they continue to grow, they're able to spread outward. The last thing you want to have to deal with is a tree that came out of the container with the roots circling tight around the trunk and you didn't cut them. They will just continue to grow larger and tighter around the trunk. You could end up with a large tree with thick roots encircling the trunk and basically choking the tree, which of course will shorten the life of the tree. So you want to make sure that you try to loosen up the tree roots a bit if they're tightly packed in the pot. All right. Do I have any more questions? I think the rest of these are people's favorite trees. Okay. I will keep going. The canopy spread, again, is about the size of the tree when it's fully grown. You don't want to plant a tree a couple feet from the side of a building because the canopy is going to grow outward on all sides of the tree. And sometimes you will see where an entire side of the tree has to be pruned back because it's growing into the building. So you want to keep in mind, if you're planting a tree species, it's going to have a wide spreading canopy, such as the oak. And you want to keep it a good 15 or more feet from the side of any buildings. Another thought on picking out your tree is if it's deciduous or evergreen. Deciduous tree is one that loses its leaves in the wintertime. An evergreen, obviously keeps its leaves or its needles. If you do not like to deal with the mess of cleaning up tree leaves in the fall, you should probably stay away from a deciduous tree. That's my best advice to you. Also, you might want to consider the form or the shape of the tree when it's mature. The growth rate of the tree. Some people are really looking for a fast growing tree. I know some people in my neighborhood put in a pool. They want to screen it off from the neighbors as quickly as possible. And in addition to the fence, they planted a whole lot of arborvitae. And that is an evergreen tree that grows really tall and wide very fast. Unfortunately, they did not think ahead to how large these trees were going to get quickly, and they planted them all about 2 feet from each other. So now they're way too tightly packed. But sometimes you just want to screen. There's other quickly growing trees you could plant as well. The downside to a quickly growing tree, a fast growing tree, is that typically they put all of their energy into growth and they tend to have a shorter lifespan. So something like a fast growing arborvitae might live 25 years compared to an oak that could live 200. Oak growing much more slowly, and the arborvitae growing quickly. It just depends on what you're looking for and what the purpose of your trees are. You also want to look at the sun, the soil, and the moisture requirements of your tree, and make sure you ask somebody, if you don't know, what kinds of things that tree is going to need. If you're planting in kind of a drainage swale or a stormwater retention pond area, you're going to want to plant a tree that's roots like moist soil, or you're going to kill the tree. So you just want to keep those kinds of things in mind. Also, a tree that has fruit. Some people love having fruit trees. A lot of times that means beautiful flowers in the spring, and the birds will eat the fruit in the summer, or you want fruit for yourself. But also keep in mind, if you're planting a fruit tree next to your driveway, it could be messy. So you want to think about whether or not the tree grows fruit and whether or not that's the right tree for your location. And then another thing you might want to consider when picking out your tree is your hardiness zone. You can look this up. It's the USDA hardiness zone map. You can look up where you live and it will give your hardiness zone. I live in central North Carolina. I believe we're 7B to 8A for hardiness zone, which is a little bit of a warmer zone for trees. Out in the western part of our state, Asheville is more like a 6A, and the mountains more like a 6A hardiness zone. So this is all in one state, but some trees that will grow out in Asheville will not grow here in the Raleigh-Durham area, because it's not the hardiness zone where that tree grows best in terms of climate. I think I have some questions. Okay. Someone had a question about native trees. Whoops, I just skipped ahead. Sorry, ignore this slide for a minute. So native trees. I do believe that native trees are probably the best for the ecosystem and the environment. And whenever possible, I think it's great to plant native trees. Absolutely. However, I don't think native trees are 100% always the answer. And I come from more of an urban forestry background, and we're talking in that case about street trees and park trees. And sometimes the soil in those areas, because it's been scraped away, used and abused so much, been sprayed with salt in the winter, things have been poured on them, things like that. The soil is just not good anymore. And sometimes a native tree just will not grow there well. In those cases, it's completely fine to think about planting non-native trees. There are some trees out there that are just beautiful. They're not native, but they're cultivated, and they're very tenuous and strong and hardy, and they will really thrive in the poor soil area or the poor conditions. So I think there's quite a few times when you really just can't always stick with native trees. You do what you can, but it just depends on your planting location. It's not always the best choice. Let's see. Someone shared that the Missouri Botanical Gardens Plant Finder has all of this information in one place if you look up a particular tree. So there you go. If you want to get the details about where a tree will grow best, there's one resource, the Missouri Botanical Garden. And we're going to give you some more resources at the end as well. Type some into the chat where you can also get some more details. Thank you so much for sharing that. Okay. So you've picked out the right tree. You followed all the steps to get the tree in the ground. You've done a thin layer of mulch, and now you want to get your tree off to a great start. So you want to know, what do I need to do for my tree to thrive? And one of the main things that you need to consider is watering it. I think this depends on your tree planting project as well. You're going to hear later about a tree planting project in Peru where they're reforesting a mountainside with hundreds to thousands of trees. And clearly, you can't go back with a watering can and keep all these watered once a week. There's tree plantings where there's large numbers of trees being put in the ground, and you really just have to depend on Mother Nature or God to make sure these trees get the water that they need. And because you're planting so many, you just accept the fact that not all of the trees are going to thrive. When you're doing a tree planting in our communities or in your church grounds, you're able to do a little bit more so that you can make sure that each individual tree ends up getting established and thriving. You don't really want to lose a single tree. So I just want to give you a few tips about tree watering. In most cases, 1 or 2 weeks after you plant your trees, they need water daily. Now, if it rains, you don't need to water it. If you're going through a dry spell for a week or two, you really need to think about watering your tree almost every day. Within a few weeks to months after you've planted your tree, you can just get away with doing it a couple times a week. And then a few months after that, you really want to go out there once a week and water your tree until the roots get established. Now, the best times of the year in general to plant a tree, depends on where you are in the country again, are going to be spring and fall, because those are the times of year where there really is a good bit of moisture. So you're not fighting everything to keep your tree watered. Your best bet is not to plant your tree in July. If you do, you're going to probably have to do a lot more watering than you see here. I know in Florida, the best time to plant your tree is probably January. So it just kind of depends on where you live. And I just want to show you real quick, you have a few options for watering your tree. I don't know how many of you have seen this. It's commonly called a gator bag or a water bag. You can order these on Amazon. A lot of landscaping companies like to use these. They might even have them at Home Depot. Basically, you put the water gator around the tree, you fill it up, and it's got the small holes in it. It will slowly seep into the ground, and it does a good job of watering the tree root ball here around the soil. This will hold 12 to 15 gallons. Takes it several hours to soak into the ground. The parts of the tree that you don't want to be watering, and this does a good job of not doing that, you really don't need to spray your tree. You don't need to water the leaves. You don't need to water the branches, the trunk. You want all the water to get into the root ball and give the roots the moisture they need. Another way you can water your trees with a soaker hose. Some people use these in their flower beds or their vegetable gardens. It's just regular soaker hose attached to the garden hose. You can wrap that like they did in this picture, just kind of around the edges of the root ball, turn it on for a couple of hours and just let it soak slowly into the soil. And the third quick way you can do it is, as you can see in this picture, just use a regular garden hose. Don't turn your hose on all the way, just turn it on to a trickle. Set it in the mulch around the base of your tree and just kind of leave it on for maybe 30 minutes. Move the hose around to the other side, do that side maybe 30 minutes, and you're good to go. So just 3 different methods you can use. There's other things out there also. Just want to show you 3 of the most common ones. And one question that I have heard a lot, because we do see this a lot, is whether or not you should stake your tree. A lot of landscaping companies stake every tree they plant. So I just want to talk about that for a minute. In general, I'm going to say no. You do not need to stake your tree. Staking actually, there's a few problems that staking can create. A lot of times the tree starts to grow and it's not getting a chance to kind of move around in the wind and the rain. It's not building the strength in the trunk that the tree naturally needs to grow strong. Because you're just supporting it so much, there's no movement in the branches. Also, another problem can be if a tree is staked, such as this, and nobody ever goes back to remove these things. And you may have seen this before, where the branches will get bigger and bigger, and then the bark and the branch start growing around the ropes or the guy wires or whatever you've used to stake your tree, and the tree just ends up getting kind of choked by the materials. So it's really not a good idea to stake your tree. When would you want to stake your tree? There's a couple instances where it could be helpful. One is if it's in a windy area. You've planted trees in a field and it's pretty windy there. It would keep them from getting blown over, and that would be fine. One thing you should remember is you should always go back and remove the stakes 1 year later. 1 year should be all that the tree needs to get established, to get the roots established. And you need to remember to go back after 1 year and remove the stakes. Another instance when you might want to consider staking your tree, street trees or in urban areas where there's a lot of pedestrians. For some reason, people tend to mess around with the tree, touch it, snapping things off of it as they walk past if it's staked. For some reason, it just makes the tree a little bit less approachable. So if you're trying to give your street tree in a busy area a good chance at not being bothered by passersby, you could stake it, and just remember to go back and remove the staking after a year once the roots get established. And I think that's all I had on getting your tree in the ground successfully. Let me see if you have any questions for me on that. Let's see. Oh, good. People have some good resources here in the chat. Another great resource is a Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center database. That is a great one. And there's a link if you want to look in your chat. And also your state's Native Plant Society website. All great ideas for selecting trees and plants. And let me think, I think I have one more. And somebody else agreed with the Missouri Botanical Garden being an excellent source of information. So be sure to go back and look in the chat if you want to capture any of those great ideas. Okay. So I am going to turn this over to Shelley, and she's going to talk a little bit more about tree planting and the Presbyterian faith. So let's see. Do I just stop sharing, Sue?
Yeah, that should work.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing here.
Ta-da.
Let me on the button. All right. Hopefully this will work. Now I'll have to move my that thingy. Okay. I did have a prayer. If we have time at the end, we can do it. It's the hymn, Trees of the Field, or They Shall Go Out with Joy. But I'm going to do a little bit of talking about some theological grounding around why it matters if we plant trees, why we care about creation. And I know some of this is probably talking to the choir, but I also think that this is helpful language when we're approaching our session and church boards and otherwise to think about why would we prioritize this over and above countless other things we could do with our time and resources. And the first thing I want to reiterate is just the goodness of creation, that unfortunately Western spirituality does have some duality between created and soul and body, and just to understand that we are not separate from creation, we are not above creation, that God created everything and declared everything good. This is from Genesis, highlighting again that scripture passage that God created all the plants and all the materials in the world, and each time they were created declared that good. So just thinking about when we do this, it's part of declaring that goodness of creation and declaring God's work in creation. Sorry, I have to keep shifting the participant box. The other thing about trees and what they help us and remind us about is they help us know and experience God and God's care. And what I think about with that is the created world in general, trees in particular, our experience with them gives us language, gives us experience to understand God and our world. And I've highlighted Psalm 1 here, because that's an example of the psalmist expressing what it's like to be a person in relationship to God, using trees as an example. They are like a tree replanted by streams of water, which bears fruit at just the right time and whose leaves don't fade. Whatever they do succeeds. And so part of why we're not just bound by sanctuaries and written word is that the created world also points us to God and gives us ways of expressing our relationship to God. And this quote was here, and I changed the language. Well, the original language is there, and then in brackets is additional language. But reading about nature is fine, but if a person walks in the woods and listens carefully, they can learn more than what is in the book, for they speak with the voice of God. And I switched it around. I said, reading about God is fine, but if a person walks in the woods and listens carefully, they can learn more than what is in the Bible, for they speak with the voice of God. I hope that's not too heretical now that I said it out loud, but I do think that part of the reason we get out and do this and plant trees and care for the created order around us is because it also draws us closer to God and gives us ways of understanding our relationship with God. All right, next slide. And again, this is another just the knowing and experiencing God's care. And so if you want to, while we're going along, you can put in the comments your favorite stand of trees, your favorite, we said favorite tree species, or the place in trees where you feel closest to God. And Mindy started talking about this in terms of the mental health benefits, but one of the other things about trees and planting trees and being in the presence of them is it helps us to increase our sense of wonder and well-being. So it slows us down and helps us pay attention to the world around us, draws us back into community and connection with God, one another, and creation, and awakens us to God. And I just want to reiterate again some of those studies that do say that being in the presence of trees in particular reduces anxiety, depression, can help focus and help with the help with ADHD. It does. Their studies show that it lowers blood pressure, improves mood, reduces stress, and helps you to sleep. So if we are concerned about the well-being of the folks we are in community with, then one place to improve that well-being is in the presence of trees and planting more trees. And this is from, again, trees also point us to hope and peace. And this first passage is from Genesis 21, and it's the first tree that's been planted in scripture. And this is when Abraham is living in Canaan and has grown in stature and power, and the local leader asked to create a treaty of peace with Abraham. And Abraham plants this tree to mark that treaty and covenant, and as a sign of worship and blessing of God. So again, trees also represent gestures of peace. Yes, trees were God's gift to emerging people to enhance survival. This marks God signs of peace. And that's the other thing that trees can do is they can memorialize and mark covenants and special times in the life of the church. And then again, another scripture example of how, again, the language of nature, trees in particular, helps us express our understanding of the gifts of God. In this case, it's the fruit of the Spirit. And this is probably, to me, if I was going to jump up and down, probably the most important aspect of why we plant trees. And I want to reiterate what Mindy started talking about in terms of the urban heat island effect and talk a little bit about that. And hopefully this, if you can't hear it, somebody wave. But we're going to listen to this 3-minute NPR episode about the correlation between racist housing practices and the urban heat effect. And then I'm going to skim you through really quick a map that just shows how redlining impacts impermeable surfaces, tree canopy, and heat islands.
Support for NPR and the following message come from us.
Bruce, can you give me a thumbs up? Could y'all hear that? Uh-oh.
I think
Yeah, yes.
Okay. All right.
General Manager and Customer Tasha England to discuss how
Shelley, it's not coming through well. Did you push the two buttons when you do the share screen at the bottom for sound?
Let me see.
You can get out of this and go back in if you want to.
Okay.
So when you hit the share screen at the bottom, there are two buttons to maximize the sound quality.
Thank you. Okay, let me see where there we go. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Every day is a new opportunity.
That was the finding of an investigation NPR did last fall with the University of Maryland's Howard Center for Investigative Journalism. Those hotter neighborhoods are not only poorer, they are also disproportionately communities of color. Now, new research suggests that pattern was locked in nearly a century ago. NPR's Meg Anderson reports.
Picture a city you know well. Imagine taking a stroll through its most tree-covered neighborhood on a hot summer day.
We feel at ease because there's greenery everywhere.
That's Sarah Lily Anderson from the nonprofit American Forests.
There might be more people walking around. You might feel cool because you're walking underneath the shade of mature, well-kept tree canopy.
Cooling things down is one of the most important things trees do, and they're also linked to all kinds of other health benefits. Data shows wealthy areas of cities tend to have more trees, and that's not an accident.
Our cities, they're not like jungles where they developed just by natural selection on their own, right? People designed these places, which means they were designed for particular people.
And by using particular policies. In the 1930s, the federal government rated neighborhoods to help mortgage lenders decide which areas of cities were risky. Risk level was largely based on the number of African Americans and immigrants living there. The government made maps and shaded the riskiest neighborhoods red, hence the term redlining. That practice and the other discriminatory housing policies of the time helped concentrate poverty for generations. You can feel the effects today, literally. In a study of more than 100 cities nationwide, nearly every neighborhood that was redlined in the 30s is hotter in temperature today than the highest rated neighborhoods. Hotter by an average of nearly 5 degrees Fahrenheit.
It's like stepping into a parking lot from a park. You would feel that relatively quickly.
That's Vivek Chandas, a professor at Portland State University and a co-author on the study.
It was very surprising when we saw that it was a pattern that we were seeing consistently across the country.
Chandas says hotter neighborhoods are likely the result of more pavement and fewer trees, and that extra heat can make a big difference.
And those communities are much more likely to face grave consequences in terms of their human health, their financial health, or generally their ability to cope with these effects.
The policies of segregation that were followed by the federal government were so powerful that they determined the racial landscape of today.
Richard Rothstein is the author of The Color of Law. It breaks down the history of segregation in the U.S. He says federal policies ensured communities of color stayed where they were, in denser housing and with fewer amenities like parks and tree-lined streets.
African Americans are restricted to neighborhoods because other neighborhoods are now unaffordable to them, restricted to neighborhoods where there are fewer trees, where there is more heat.
The 1968 Fair Housing Act prohibited housing discrimination, but it didn't address the damage already done. Nearly 90 years after the redlining maps were created, you can still feel the difference. Meg Anderson, NPR.
All right, and let me pull up this other thing. I just want to show you really quickly an example of the impacts of redlining on both tree canopy and impermeable surfaces. Impermeable surfaces being that built landscape that we talked about and how that increases the heat out. And so this is from Groundwork RVA, and you can see here in this first map, and I'll scroll up, this is the historically redlined areas.
You need to share your screen.
Oh, nuts. Okay. Sorry. Here we go. I clicked on that and then didn't share it. All right, here we go. Sorry about that. All right, so we'll see the historically redlined. As I scroll up here, you can see those features. And then the next layer, thanks to mapping. And this is Richmond, Virginia, which is where I'm from. I would say, again, that NPR article already indicated that this is not inconsistent with any urban area in the United States. So here you can see relative to redlined areas, the tree canopy from 100 to 0%. And then this to me is also telling, is particularly for us in Richmond, because that big blue line down the middle of the city is a river. And all these impervious surfaces and lack of trees also contributes to flash flooding, which is also a global climate change issue because it doesn't rain nice and softly anymore. It pours down rain for a couple of hours and drops 3 to 6 inches and causes all kinds of problems. But you can see there just the impact of redlining on particular neighborhoods, losing tree canopy and losing any pervious surfaces. So let me switch back to the PowerPoint. And so, yeah, that's why I would say I would jump up and down for this one. If we look at the initiatives of the PCUSA around Matthew 25, which are to build congregational vitality, dismantle racism, and eradicate poverty, taking part in planting and caring for trees does all three of those things. It does help to dismantle historic racist practices that allowed for poorer and neighborhoods of people of color to have less trees, to have less healthy environments. It helps with improved well-being and health. This summer, I participated in a urban heat mapping project that also was, we mapped the urban heat islands with one heat sensor on our car, and we also had an air sensor on our car. And Mindy already talked about that trees help to filter the air. So we were looking at the particulate matter of different neighborhoods. And again, there are higher incidences of asthma in neighborhoods that lack trees and these urban heat island issues. So that's also addressing mental or physical health and well-being. And I would say that the reason it builds congregational vitality is tree planting is an intergenerational communal practice. Young and old can do this. There are opportunities for everybody to take part in it. And it does help to undo racist practices in areas of systemic poverty. So I do think this is probably one of the most important things. I think it's an antidote to despair. There's a lot about the global climate crisis that seems beyond our control or repair, and it's part of our responsibility as Christians to participate in acts of hope, and planting trees are long-term practices of hope. And then here's a quote from Job that you see there, just again reminding us of the practice of hope. And then I was just going to share briefly about one project that we did that was completed in March of 2020, in the spring of 2020, along the flood wall as part of our lowline garden project in general. This is the green, that was the last space, and it is in downtown Richmond, and it is in one of those areas where you can see, obviously you can see the built landscape and the urban heat environment. And this is some of the before shots, and I would draw your attention to also that we are adjacent to the canal on the James River, and this is I-95 and railroad tracks coming over, and the water from the 95 and the highways was draining directly into the canal from the road down the pipes into the canal. And this is a little bit of what it looks like shortly after planting. I highlighted a couple of things. One, we put in a rain garden, so a lot of the water coming off the interstate is being filtered and reducing the particulate matter that is going into the James and improving the water quality. Also, we do aim for native planting, and we aim to the best of our ability in an urban environment to plant native plants. We're not 100%, but we're close. I will say we have had some challenges with our native plants in our rain garden and had to replant those this spring with another set of native plants because of some of the issues that Mindy mentioned. It probably has to do with some of what's coming off the interstate that we're trying to filter, the way light was hitting it and how water was standing. So I'll note that. And I'll note that this is one of the things that makes capital trees unique, in that we focus on the ecosystem around the trees also. So we do plant more than just trees, understanding that trees thrive when everything around them is thriving. So a little bit about getting started. We've done some of this tonight, but I think it's good to educate yourself on taking care of trees, the best type of trees, and most importantly, to learn about the tree canopy in your area. What are the needs of your community and what are the goals? Many municipalities have tree canopy goals. So for example, Charlotte has a 50% by 2050 goal of improving their tree canopy. So look into that, find your other greening organizations and learn about the tree canopy goal in your area and how you can contribute. And then I would say before you go plant your own trees somewhere, join a community event. So join a community event to plant trees. Those are always fun. It's always fun to plant trees, but you know what's even more important, as Mindy has hinted at, is maintaining the trees. So are there events like tree stewards or otherwise that go in the long-term care of trees or the environment around the trees? Learn about that. Go to a learning event in your area about native planting, about tree planting, about what's being done. And the other thing you can do, is advocate. I hope I can get back. Oh no. Let me see here. Yep, there we go. Is to advocate. Okay.
Oh, that's exciting.
Sorry. There we go. Hopefully it'll go there. If not, I'll just jump through them all there. Advocate for city and municipal policies that make tree canopy a priority and not clear cutting land in order for development to happen a priority. And there are tons of other community organizations. I have a list. I started trying to look by state for folks that were here, but these are some national organizations that often have local affiliates, although Tree Charlotte doesn't. But Groundwork USA does, Green Forest Work, and the Tool Bank. And I raised the Tool Bank because a cost in planting trees are the tools, and often you can rent those from the Tool Bank. That's their whole job, is to underwrite the expense and rent tools to organizations so that they don't have to carry that expense or even store the tools. Some other things about getting started: plant trees to celebrate, honor, or memorialize. Determine the site. Once you've learned, is your church campus the site? Is there another community location in need, or are private homes an option? I was at Tree Charlotte last week, and they noticed they are tracing that the biggest loss of tree canopy is on private housing developments. And so they are focusing on tree planting in private homes and increasing the tree canopy that way. Also, plan for care. You can't just plan it and forget it. Mindy has mentioned some of that, but I can't underline that enough. Plan for care in your budgeting, plan for care for the long term. And then also, I was just going to raise a few ways to recruit volunteers. Local colleges and universities often have volunteer recruiting pages. We go through the Community Foundation for our volunteers. So thinking even outside your congregation, are there ways to connect through other organizations to volunteers? Because this is, like I said, it's a tangible way to improve the community, and it's something that people like to get behind. And then I said, think creatively and don't go it alone. This is a wonderful, wonderful way to partner with community organizations. Funding. So just a few things. You really, when you budget for this, need to budget for the plants, the care of the plants for, I would say, 1 to 5 years. And that includes things like buying hoses to make sure you have 500 feet of hose to reach the trees you plant, or the bags if you're not able to do that. Budget for volunteer costs, from gloves to supplies and maintenance, which is under the care, and staffing. We have a horticulturalist on staff who helps to train our volunteers when they come out for events. Consider honorary or memorial tree gardens. This is where probably partnering with a nonprofit is helpful, because there are Department of Forestry, Conservation, Parks and Rec, or your DPU or W organization that might have grants, as do community organizations. We have tree giveaways coming up on November 6th, because that's Richmond's Arbor Day, and that's because it's tree planting season. We don't plant trees in the spring because it gets too hot, so we're giving away trees on November 6th, and education events. I'd also say look at corporate sustainability initiatives. This is one way that many corporations are giving back to the community. They're giving back to the community is through helping with tree planting initiatives. Add more trees to church cemeteries. Yes. So I think that's the end of my presentation. I hope that one. Yeah, that was it. The funding was the last one. On Arbor Day and American Forest were some of the other organizations.
On.
All right. Good evening and greetings from Northwest Missouri, which is the land of the Sac, Fox, Missouri, Iowa, Potawatomi, and Kickapoo. And I want to say a shout out to Sue Regier, who's got a wonderful history with loving trees as well. So here's my Missouri Department of Conservation tree badge to say good work, Sue, for all those wonderful years you shared with trees and your state parks. I also want to say hi to Abby Brockway and to Ann Owen. We go back a little bit of ways with PEC, and they're just such wonderful creation justice advocates. So glad they're on the call, as well as all of you. Yeah, so just a little bit of a segue here. I have in my front yard 15 trees in containers waiting to be planted that I ordered from a nursery in Missouri, not too far from the Missouri Botanical Gardens, in fact, and they'll be planted along our beautiful boulevard system in St. Joseph. And this is through a cooperative effort with a service club, the Rotary Club, as well as a Sustainable Environment Committee that I work with for the city. So that's been good. Well, I'm going to ask you all to just take a breath in, just kind of breathe in deeply to the bottom of your lungs. Okay, take a couple of those wonderful deep breaths of the gifts that the trees have given us with oxygen. And then, of course, we're going to breathe out a little carbon dioxide for them as we go. And you can pretend to be a tree and move your arms around just a little bit in the wind if you need to take a little bit of a break here with movement. But again, thank you all for being here. Well, I am very excited about the project I'm going to be speaking of. And also want to mention that Sue, Garrett, Paul Hines, and Bruce have been part of this effort. But what I want to say is that trees are some of my favorite things, you know, pieces of God's creation, parts of God's creation. And a person that I also appreciate as part of God's creation is Jed, who is the writer of What God Has Started in the Presbyterian Tree Fund. And Jed and Jenny and Thiago are persons that live in Peru, and Jed wrote this overture that was supposed to be presented at a previous General Assembly, which didn't happen. But it's going to be coming up in the 225th General Assembly, you know, the hybrid assembly coming up in Louisville next year. So what we have here is an overture that's going to go to the General Assembly written by the Reverend Jed Cobal. I met Jed in Peru in a Presbyterian environmental trip a few years ago, and then he's been up in the States since, and I've worked with him there as well. But he met Jenny, his wife, in Peru. They're married and have a wonderful young son, Thiago. We'll show a picture of them in a moment. But Jed has this fabulous idea that he wanted to help us understand the importance of tree planting that's going on in Peru by this woman named Mama Toya. And we will watch a video of Mama Toya as well, because it just gives us and shares the heart of her work in planting trees in Peru. The overture, which will be coming up, is more detailed than I will be presenting tonight. because what we're doing with Presbyterians for Earth Care, working with the Presbyterian Hunger Program and Presbyterian Missions, is to set some groundwork for funding for the Presbyterian Tree Fund. In the overture, the information that is being shared will help the Presbyterian Church staff and committees to look at this particular carbon offset program and give the monies that they wish to donate after their flights to this fund, rather than some other funds that we have been using, which are very good funds. But this also helps the Presbyterian Mission Agency and keeps it all under a Presbyterian umbrella. So what we want to do here through this overture, again, is to seek to offset carbon emissions due to work-related travel of the personnel and the PMA. Again, that part is coming up in the overture, which will go to the 225th General Assembly. And right now, what we'll want to do is share a little bit about how this came about. So go ahead, if you don't mind, and show the pictures of Jed and Jenny and Thiago from the Presbyterian Hunger Program website that I sent, just so you can get an idea of who they are and how they have been working with the Presbyterian Hunger Program. So PMA has a program that work called HANDS, Los Manos, which is an organization that works through the Presbyterian Hunger Program to help people in various countries where the Presbyterian Mission Agency is working. And one of those is Peru. So thank you, Mindy. I did want to say thank you for doing this. She's searching here for those pictures, but that'll be worth your wait. In fact, Jed was hoping to come on tonight, but was not able to do that. And you can be introduced then to Jed. But he's a pastor, Presbyterian pastor, and has just done a lot, not only working with trees, but also working in an area which is one of the 10 most polluted areas and cities in the world that you have likely heard about. But he's very active, and it would also be a fine thing to support Jed and his work. So I'm going to skip that for just a moment. And what this is, that's okay. We're good. We'll get back to Jed. But Jed has taken this overture and his interest and his passion for planting trees about this woman that you see right here on the slide. And this is Mama Toya. Mama Toya is going to be telling her story. And this shows us what Mindy was referring to a little bit earlier during her presentation about one woman's way of planting trees for the world. So here we go, Mama Toya from Peru. Thank you. And it does have audio here. I'm not sure where that is, but
¿Qué más la naturaleza? ¿Qué más nuestro ambiente que debemos contrarrestar?
Can you not hear that?
we're good now. It's good.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Tengo flores, me dedico a eso. Tengo que ponerme más fuerte, con ellos converso, me emocionan sus aromas, me da salud, me da más voluntad para sobrevivir y para poder afrontar.
Can we make it bigger?
Bien, Mamá Toya. de repente muchas personas hoy
You
se
could go to
sentirán
the YouTube posting of it, Mindy, and that'll just do the
viendo.
screen.
También nos han contado que normalmente cuando no está usted en la época de cuarentena, es decir, en otro momento, tiene plantaciones en los cerros, desarrolla trabajo de forestación. Cuéntanos un poquito sobre ello.
Tengo 21 hectáreas plantados entre quinoa, eucalipto, ceticio, pino, que ya tienen años algunos. Según la fecha que hemos plantado por año, ¿no? Están de tamaño. Algunos ya tienen 5 metros, 4 metros de altura. Para mí era muy triste cuando ya nos prohibió no la salida de la casa. Me daba mucha pena, pero ya tenía que pensar en otra actividad. Y es la razón que ya me he dedicado acá a mi jardincito. Tengo también acá durazno. Y así, doy gracias a Dios de que tengo mi salud entre las plantas, entre los árboles.
Bien, Mamá Toya, para terminar el día de hoy, quiero que nos des un consejo sobre lo que la gente debe hacer en esta época que se encuentra encerrada en casa.
Les recomendaría a mis hermanas, no, toda la familia peruana como otros países, ¿no? Que dedican en algo que la puede ayudar. Llámase así, plantitas, ¿no? Se hace ornamentales en nuestra ventanita, con maceteros, ¿no? También dedicarse a actividades de tejido, en todo eso. Entonces, para poder restablecer este mal que nos está atacando a nivel mundial y rogando siempre a Dios, el que nos proteja, darle consuelo a los hijos, haciéndole ver el trabajito.
Nos encontramos. Muy bien, Mamá Toya. Vamos a rogar desde este medio que te bendiga grandemente. Muchas gracias, Mamá Toya. Hasta una próxima oportunidad.
Muchísimas gracias.
El día de hoy nos encontramos en Villa El Sol visitando a Mamá Toya, que en esta mañana nos va a contar cómo le va dentro de esta época de...
Yeah. So if you have slide 3, you could put that back up.
Okay.
And if you didn't catch what was going on there, by the way, the first part, Mama Tori was talking about how she was able to flourished by planting trees up the mountain. But then COVID came. She was not able to leave her space, so she began planting flowers in her garden. Was that story? So what I am enthused about is the way that we can, as Presbyterians and members of Presbyterians for Earth Care, contribute to global tree planting and work with our partner Presbyterians in countries who are already engaged in the Presbyterian mission. So what happened was, after I found out Jed had written this overture, I asked the mission advocates, the advocacy committee of PEC, to get together and meet with Rebecca Barnes and also with Jessica Phelps and from the Presbyterian Hunger Program, and figure out a way that we could go ahead and gather some funds so that we could begin to have a process so we could be thinking about where we're going to get the money once we get enough funding in that fund to begin to decide how we're going to plant the trees. So this is what Rebecca has shared with us. She reopened a fund called the Restoring Creation Fund, which had not been active for some time, but was a line item in the Presbyterian Hunger Program work. And she was aware that there are already tree programs being shared in Peru that we just talked about, in Madagascar, in Ghana, in Cameroon, and these are all through Presbyterian Mission. So she would like to see money that we have collected and will be collecting through our carbon offset program, or anytime you would just like to give to that fund. What will happen is that the Presbyterian Hunger Program staff, working with the committee, the consulting committee with the Presbyterian Hunger Program, will look at grant requests that will have been written by the persons in Peru, Madagascar, Ghana, and Cameroon, and see how they would like to spend some of the money that has been collected for tree planting. And then say $5,000, for example, can go to the tree project in Madagascar, which is very much in need. And this will be very exciting. Again, that fund has just been opened a few months ago, and ways that you can give to it are, for example, if you do fly somewhere, you can look up under the Berkeley calculator to decide how much money might be appropriate to give toward a carbon offset, or you can just give monthly in the Pillar program. They have this wonderful program called Pillars of the Church, and you could donate to JED at the minimum of $10 a month. You just call this 1-800 number is the easiest way to do it, and say, I'd like to become a pillar of the church. And you can donate to the Hunger Program separately. You can donate to the Restoring Creation Fund separately. Any of your favorite parts of the Presbyterian Church and its mission, you could donate monthly to. Or you can donate in honor of somebody. If you want to donate in honor of Sue Regier for all her work and North Carolina Parks, you can say, I want to donate $50 for Sue. And that will be a part of that fund that we're establishing. Or if you want to just donate one time because you love trees, that would be a way to do that. So what we're doing here, working with Presbyterian Hunger Program, and as well as PEC and with JED, is to say, if you want to, this is a great way to begin to plant trees, continue to appreciate the work of PCUSA, continue to appreciate the work of our mission partners, and just to breathe deeper as we take those restoring creation breaths ourselves. So it's a work in progress, but we can begin right now. And if another way to go about this is look at the Presbyterian Hunger Program's blog that has the information and the little video about Mama Toya and much more. So there we go. Thank you.
Diane, I have the picture of Jed. Do you want me to still show that?
Oh, yes, I do. Yes, because they're just such a beautiful family. This is Jed, Jenny, and Thiago. And, keep them in your prayers, because they've had such a terrific time during COVID. Oh my goodness, they've had such political upheaval in the country with the election of their president. And it's just a very difficult place to live anyway. But do keep them in your prayers. They're wonderful prayers.
Yeah. Wait a minute here. I'm coming to it. Here we go. Wait a minute here. I just lost it again. Okay, sorry, I've lost it again. Let me see here. Let's see. That's it. I just had it open and now I can't seem to find it.
Mindy, while you're looking, why don't we ask if there are any questions from people?
Yeah, that would be great. If anybody has any questions you want to put in the chat while I try to find this picture again.
We'll save the information in the chat, right?
Yes.
It may be we've gone over the hour, so maybe we should just.
All right.
Shelley has the video prayer for closing if you'd like.
Okay, that'd be great. She's muted. Shelley, you're muted.
Mountains and the hills shall ring forth for you. There'll be shouts of joy, and the trees of the field shall clap their hands. And the trees of the field shall clap their hands. And the trees of the field shall clap their hands. And the trees of the field shall clap their hands. And you'll go out with joy. Shall go out with joy and be led forth with peace. And the mountains and the hills shall bring forth for you. There'll be shouts of joy, and the trees of the field shall clap their hands. And the trees of the field shall clap their hands. And the trees of the field shall clap their hands. And the trees of the field shall clap their hands. And you'll go out with joy. You shall go out with joy and be led forth with peace. And the mountains and the hills shall bring forth for you. There'll be shouts of joy, and the trees of the field shall clap their hands. And the trees of the field shall clap their hands. And the trees of the field shall clap their hands. And the trees of the field shall clap their hands. And you'll go out with joy.
Amen.
Mindy, can you hear me? Mindy?
Yes.
Kevin Millar has a very good point in the chat. Planting trees is a laudable effort for many reasons: local, regional, global, spiritual, aesthetic. Trees do store carbon and help mitigate climate change. I want to make sure you are aware that major systemic changes in the way we live and use fossil fuels needs to be changed drastically and rapidly if we are to spare our grandchildren and great-grandchildren from living in a world that we would barely recognize, to put it mildly. I will tell you, Presbyterians for Earth Care understands that. Next month, on November 18th, we will have a meeting to review the work that happened at the Conference of Participants, the COP 26, that's starting in Glasgow on October 31st. We are sending 3 non-government representatives from our organization to that and providing some funds for them to attend it. We do understand very much we need to be advocates for significant change. Tree planting is helpful. There are many other things, specifically in the area of government policy, we need to work on, and this organization is addressing some of that. So if you want to get on the email list and are not already, put your email address in the chat and you'll find out about the other educational and upcoming programs that are taking place, and we'll probably be happy to share those emails with our friends at the Presbyterian Tree Project as well. So if you want to learn more about providing funds for that. But Kevin's point, I think, is one that is very well taken. And a reminder, we did a major conference this summer, and we have 20 videos on YouTube that you can enjoy, including one by Shelley. Well worth your time.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Blessings. Beautiful song to end on. This Jed and Jenny's page is on the PCUSA website if you want to read more about them. So,
Thank you.
anything else, Shelley or Mindy or Diane, you want to add?
I don't think so.
Thank you. Good night. God bless.
Thank you for your time.
Like your backdrop.
Thanks.
Diane, can I chat with you on the phone in 5 minutes? I have an idea for you.
Oh, yes, sure.
I'll give you a quick call.
All right. Okay.
Are we all
Thank you all. Good night.